This episode was originally published in June of 2023.
This is Kent Hance, best storyteller in Texas. Thanks for joining us. Today, saying of the day is the 7 or the 11 are going to come back up again sometime. And that was told to me by Night Train Lane, Dick Lane, who was from Austin. And I want to talk a little about him. I told somebody the story the other day, and they said, you need to tell that on your podcast. By the way, I couldn't think of that quarterback's name at Houston Baptist, and was Bailey Zappi. And he's playing for the New England Patriots. I think he's their number 2 guy. He went to Houston Baptist. He was their 5th choice. And the other 4 kids got bigger schools. They went other places, and they took him. He is the only one left. Only one left on their list. And I got a friend of mine, Eddie Already, sent me a note, and with a little stats, a little Wikipedia on Bailey Zappi from East Victoria High School in Victoria, Texas. And, you know, there's a kid that somebody forgot to pull him over and say, hey, you can't do this. He thought he could do it. And he, Houston Baptist, played Texas Tech in one of those games when he was down there as a freshman. And one of those games where they pay you $800,000, come up and beat up on them. You know, Troy got $850,000 from LSU 7 or 8 years ago, and they went in there and beat them. And so you got to be careful. And you get where you start beating them, they won't pay you that anymore. They won't invite you in. And but that makes some schools, you know, $750,000, $800,000 makes their budget. And so those are big games. And that you see those early football games, it's always, you know, a mismatch, and somebody's getting paid. I wanted to talk about Night Train Lane. Dick Lane was born in Austin, and he went to Anderson High School, and they played in the Prairie View Interscholastic League, the all-black schools, and that they made it the state championship when he was a senior, and had a great team. They knew somebody that knew somebody was a coach. It's Scottsbluff, Nebraska, junior college. He went up there and played junior college ball for a year. And then he got in the Army, was at Fort Ord, and made the All-Army team as a receiver. He was born here in Austin, and some people right off of East 12th Street heard him crying, and he had been wrapped in some newspapers and put in a dumpster. And they found him, and the lady bathed him and took him to raise and took care of him. The Night Train Lane, there are 2 stories on where he got that nickname, and one was that he was shooting pool on East 12th Street with some guys and had a bet, and he sank a long shot, you know, made the 8 ball and won, and the guy that had bet him took off running, and he grabbed a cue ball and hit him right behind the ear, knocked him completely out. And at the hospital, at Seton, they asked the guy what happened, what hit him, and he said it was a night train, you know, and that got back to Night Train. People call him that. The other story is that when he was with the L.A. Rams, song came out, Night Train, and it was number 1 on the R&B charts. And that when they were in camp, he would dance in the hall when somebody would play that song, and that he liked it. And that, but he didn't really like that nickname at first. Didn't like it all that much. And they had a game. The L.A. Rams played the then Washington Redskins. And Washington, they were led by running back Charlie Choo-Choo Justice was an All-American, came in third or fourth in Heisman voting from North Carolina, who averaged, you get this, I always like it, he averaged 25 yards a carry in high school. That's pretty good. And but Choo-Choo Justice was the hot item in the NFL, and that's everybody that's talking about Choo-Choo Justice. In the LA Times after the game, the Rams won, and they had a headline on the sports page. It said, "Night Train derails Choo-Choo Justice." And they said that Night Train from that day on, he loved that nickname, and he loved the sports people. You know, it gave them something to play with, and they'd always, say so-and-so broke loose and then vanished in the night as he was hit by a night train. He led the NFL in interceptions in 1952 with 14, and it still stands today. Still NFL record, and it stands today. And he was married several times. His second wife was Diana Washington, R&B singer, and that was his second wife, and it was her sixth husband. And then he later got married to a lady who was a school teacher in Detroit, and she was the first African American ever used in a Coca-Cola advertisement. And nice lady. But the NFL did not treat people like they treat them now. And I knew Night Train. I met him time with Cloyce Box, who I've talked about on the store, best storyteller in Texas before. Cloyce played for the Detroit Lions in the early 60s, and he was on the team with Bobby Lane in Night Train Lane. And that Bobby used to tell people that he and Night Train were twins. They played together. One of them played offense, one of them played defense, and they were all good buddies. But Night Train didn't have economic. Players didn't make much. Cloyce Box had a job working for Fuller Construction in New York, building skyscrapers in the off season. And he didn't, he played football, and then he got ready to go to law school, and that was, didn't go back and play football, didn't have time. And but that's when Detroit had their last winning teams. They were great. And Bobby Lane was from Lubbock, and he's a Dallas boy, married a Lubbock girl, and that lived out there. He was a friend of mine. Colorful guy, liked to gamble. And Cloyce said he was the best he'd ever seen at playing cards, and that Night Train was the best he'd ever seen at shooting dice. And so Cloyce came down to Austin, and I picked him up at the airport. He flew his own plane in here, and we went out to this nursing home to see Night Train. And you'd have thought Jesus had just come back when Cloyce walked in. And he wanted to go back to his room, and he said, "Let's shoot some dice." He had dice. Everywhere you looked, there was some dice. And Night Train, he got there on the floor, and he was rolling dice, and he'd say, sevens or 11s are going to come back up, and which he's talking about good luck or bad luck. It's going to come back up one way or the other. And he took, I don't know, $500, $600, $700 off Cloyce, and maybe $1,000. Cloyce was going to give it to him anyway, but he said Night Train liked it better when he won it, and would razz him about it for years. But they were like brothers, and so was Bobby. And that I've been surprised, and I'm going to say something to the people at Austin. I don't know that they've ever recognized Night Train Lane, and they should. And he played at a time that it wasn't fair. And still holds, he's a citizen of Austin, Texas, still holds the NFL record today for the most interceptions in the season. and he played a long time. Played for the Cardinals after playing for the Rams, and then was traded to Detroit. Played for the Lions, and they were very successful there. He had he was a colorful guy, had a colorful personality, and it went in there. Well, I'd been a state senator, and so Clovis introduced me as senator, and then the night train introduced me as a U.S. senator. And one lady wanted me to how well did I know Goldwater when he was there. It was kind of a funny deal, but it was good to see people that had shared something together, that were close. They were closer than any fraternity brothers. And Claus had made a lot of money in the oil business, and he didn't forget Night Train Lane. And Claus, he had the record for receptions in one game for Detroit. One time, like he had 12 in one game. And Williams, that played for Odessa Permian and then played at UT, he broke that record for the Lions. And another Texas connection there. But Dick Lane was just one in 1,000. In this day and time, would have been making 15, 20 million or something, had everything taken care of. But he had to have old buddies that took care of him because they didn't have any jobs. After he was his playing days were over, he got a front office job with Detroit, and then later became commissioner of the Police League, Police Academy, and Police League for young people in Detroit, and ran that association for underprivileged kids. But here's a guy that had been abandoned and didn't have things going for him, and had a pretty tough life. And boy, he made it head on. And Austin, they ought to do something to honor him, and I'm going to talk to him about that. I talked to Kirk Bowles, who's a sports writer for the Austin American-Statesman, and he said he did not know of anything that they had done for Night Train Lane, and that he was a person that helped a lot of young people, and ran a good league and getting kids involved in Detroit, and that should be recognized, and that had play in different places and different stadiums and things like that. And the way he got on with the Rams, after he got out of the Army, he was working for a airplane manufacturing plant, Lockheed, in Southern California, and he rode a bus to work, and the bus would go by this building, said L.A. Rams ticket office. And so he went in there one time, got off the bus there, and went in and asked him if he could play. And they said, "We're selling tickets." He said, "I can sell you a lot of tickets, if y'all let me play." And they finally pushed him off on somebody, and he showed him his writings. He had old newspapers folded up from Scottsbluff, Nebraska, where he had led them, and also an Army at Fort Ord, where he had made all Army, which was a big deal back during World War II and right afterwards. And that so they turned him over to some coach. And after the first preseason game, the head coach said, a lot of things may happen, but Lane's going to be playing. And that he played when he was in the military, he played a receiver. But he was just tenacious and could stay with anyone that was a good receiver. And when he hit him, you didn't have to check and see if it was a good tackle. You could hear it. Kind of a colorful story, and that I got a chance to meet him one time and saw him rolling that dice with Clovis, and that Clovis, I said, "You let him win at 500, 1,000, whatever it is." He said, yeah. Said I could have tried, and he'd won the same amount. So he knew him, and that's when he told me. He said he's the best dice shooter there was. And then when they'd have road games, they'd get shooting dice and playing cards. And he said, but Bobby Lane was best. Bobby Lane was a guy that Rooster Andrews one time said, Bobby Lane, when he walks in a grocery store, he looks around and thinks he's the best shopper there. And Cloy said he'd come in the huddle, and he'd just have confidence. You'd know that y'all were going to win. And he'd bring them back many times, and they'd win and win big. But he was the personalities of some of those guys gets lost and just becomes a name and a number. And Night Train Lane's name, and his number was holding the NFL record. We're talking about over 70 years. And there's very few NFL records that have withstood the time of 70 years. So it's kind of a tribute today to Night Train Lane, and I'm going to check on it and see if Austin's done anything in his name. And if they have, I'll let y'all know. And if they haven't, well, I'm going to push them. They ought to do something. 7 and 11, they're going to come back up. And that was his philosophy on life. If he had bad times, times are going. There's good times were right around the corner, and to overcome all the difficulties he had in life, he had to have that philosophy that when things were going bad, riding a bus to work, and decided to get off and go in there and tell them that he wanted to play football for the L.A. Rams. Not many people would have done that, and he did it, and it worked, and then he reached the happiness in his point when the headline said, Night Train Lane derails Choo-Choo Justice.